I want to know what one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn as a person is. And it's one that is a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, um, especially when you start using it in practice. So no one gives a fuck about you. Not a single fuck. No one cares. No one is going to spend the immense amount of time it would take to properly empathize with and understand where you're coming from. No one is going to sit down and be willing to work with you through your bad times, through your worst times, in order to make it to your best times. No one has that patience. No one wants to have that patience. Any concept of loyalty and love, virtue, championship, these things, people just don't have them. They just don't. Maybe there's the very few close friends that you get who really, really want to aspire to those things, and they exist. They're there. I have people like that. The vast majority of people, unless they try extremely, extremely hard, are not going to be able to empathize with you or care. They're just going to set you aside as they have every single other person, regardless of whatever it is that you feel as a result of their actions. They just don't care. And to be honest, I've had to kind of force myself to not to either. Um, and then eventually, after I did that for long enough, I experienced so many negative things that I was just unable to care in the same way that I did before. But there was a time where I just wanted to empathize with everyone. There was a time when I made it the very basis of my moral principles was that regardless of however much time it takes me, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to understand. Each and every action that I take is going to be as a result of an in-depth gathering of information that I've gathered on that specific person. And as a result of having gathered that information, remembering it, writing down, and what have you, I will take the actions that are of the most empathy, that have a character of kindness to them rather than of misunderstanding and vitriol. Because I had experienced so often an immense amount of misunderstanding in my own life that I didn't want to act in that way to other people. I wanted to be a forgiving friend. I wanted to be a friend who was willing to listen and to understand why someone would act the way that they did and not cast judgment just because they did the things that they did. But that takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of time to be able to hone a skill like that, and honestly, there are just better things you could be doing instead of doing that with everyone who meets your path. It's just a fact. It's just a fact of life. You're not going to be able to be every single person's savior, and you shouldn't have to be. It's their job to figure out who they want to be and how to make it out of their situation. The only thing you can do is give the vague implications that something is wrong and try to address a way to fix that. If what you're doing extends beyond that, then you're just doing too much. There's only so much you can do. And if you try to overextend yourself and be, the empathetic ear that hears and sees absolutely everything in context rather than out of context, then you're gonna be spending a vast amount of time on one person that you could easily be spending on something else. That's the reality. And the reality is that while you're doing all of this, even if you do take the Herculean effort it would take to be able to keep track of everyone's information and to be able to understand everything as to not step on too many toes, say too many negative things, to properly accommodate, if you are able to properly accommodate these people, once you finally do that, you think they're going to do the same to you? Do you really think so? No one. No one has that energy unless they build it within themselves, unless they toil away at being able to build themselves as someone with that much control and understanding. Think people are going to do that? Probably not. And even if they do, the very small, very tiny chance that they actually follow in those footsteps, then what? Okay, someone understood you. The amount of time you spent trying to get someone to understand you and to be a very kind person to you and to be able to put up with your bullshit, you could have just spent on not caring, building yourself into someone who didn't care about the reactions of others or the need to be understood or cared for by others. You could have just built yourself into someone who felt that way. I feel like that's a better use of time, a far, far more practical use of time than doing this push and pull of giving and giving to someone until eventually they just give back to you. If they don't give back to you, you're just going to be pissed about it. You're just going to go, oh, well, it turned out I didn't get what I wanted in return. Time to burn everything down. Like, what's the point of that? There's no need. I was in that mindset for the longest time, especially when I first got onto the internet and really got into talking to people, that in order for me to be empathized with and understood, I need to empathize with and understand everyone, absolutely everyone, on the deepest possible level. Therefore, I will never cast any sort of judgment, I will never say any sort of opinion, I will never give anyone up without knowing that I have absolutely enough evidence to do so. Insane. It's insane. You can't know everyone's life story. And I would actively criticize people for not remembering mine because I put so much effort in to remember theirs. You see the problem here? You see the problem here is that on one side, you have someone trying to be as empathetic as they possibly can, be as balanced and giving things enough of the benefit of the doubt because I understood that everything has a reason, everything has a cause. You don't commit a murder just out of nowhere. It isn't just a choice that you arbitrarily made. You commit a murder because there was enough psychological and environmental factors to cause you to do that. If one of my friends did that and I saw it, my first reaction wouldn't be terrible, time to cut ties with this person. My first reaction would have been, well, how can I understand this person and help them? And of course, now my reaction is, oh, you did that? Cool. So it's kind of detached in the other direction. You go from being so attached that you need to understand everything and empathize with everything and to be able to be the biggest mediator, the biggest carer person, to now being so detached that you don't even care about people's emotional baggage in both directions. You don't care about their emotional baggage enough to fix it or enough to not drop someone when they're acting like a dick, and you don't care about their emotional baggage to drop them in the first place. If, for example, a murder is committed or they just do something really bad, I go, oh, Jeff did something really bad today? Well, let's add that onto the list. Who cares? I'm going to keep talking to them because they're interesting. It's those moral quantifications that I've found myself having a bigger and bigger problem with as I get older. I've noticed that all of these things we do end up being siphoned through some kind of veneer of morality that is applied to one group of people but is not applied to another. Our group is saint. Our group is I was going to say our group has sanctity. Our group is supreme. We have the good and you don't. But who gets to draw that line? Who gets to decide one action or one group is moral whereas one is not? And who gets to decide when or when those things are not moral? Because a lot of the time you see these people doing the same things, and yet when one person does them, it's okay, and yet when another doesn't, it's not. And so I don't understand this. I don't understand that this whole moral idea that we need to be outraged about who does something. If you do something, now all of a sudden it's a big deal. It doesn't affect me. Like, if it's not affecting me, why would I care? Yeah, you did something bad. Big whoop. So did everyone else you're gonna know. Like, I don't understand why we need to care. I don't understand why it's a big deal that someone does something bad. I'm not going to prevent it. I'm not going to just sit here and be the police of the world trying to enforce my moral code because that's boring. Like, this idea that we need to somehow police everybody and always be doing the right thing, it's ludicrous. It takes so much energy out of what you could be spending on just developing yourself and enjoying your own time. um, And it's not even that I'm completely opposed to doing quote unquote good things, but only insofar as they benefit you. And for some people, the act of doing good things is all they need to benefit them. It's the pleasure of bringing more good to the world. And to an extent, I can understand that because I've often talked about the importance of charity, of helping others, right? I've talked about how if you're charitable to the world around you, then that's going to come back to you in some small way because it creates a ripple effect. That was the logic behind it, and that's definitely true. And so you should always be seeking to, lift others out of the dark place that they're in because once you do that, the society around you as a whole is going to be better because they're going to use that positive energy and use it to influence somebody else or just to do something positive in their own life, whether it be building the house that I live in or influencing somebody to be the next tech giant. There's always going to be somewhat of a ripple when you do these positive actions, and so there is a very real system of self-benefit to do so. But I think once you go so overboard with it as to try and save everyone, you end up really neglecting yourself. It's about balance here. Yeah, doing good things is going to come back to you in some ways, but if you're constantly doing good things, then you overextend yourself to such an extent that you're just not benefiting anyone. Or you're benefiting one person in such a one sided fashion that there's no point in even doing it anymore. And so, you know, when I think about this idea that no one really cares about you. They're just doing what they have to do through life to be able to benefit themselves in the most effective way, um, then it all begins to become more clear that this mentality of caring for absolutely everyone or of relying strictly on other people to understand and accept you, this mentality becomes very, very sketchy, faulty, bad. There's some screws that are missing and things are shaking around a bit more than they should. It's not a good way of doing things. And the only solution to such a problem is to be able to build yourself into someone who just doesn't care, who can get the negative comments and be able to brush over them and say, well, that was negative, that's life. Being able to be the person who, when you're not accepted by someone you at one point felt quite close to and cared about, to go, well, they've got their own shit that they're going through. They've got their own problems. And now I'm just going to do life better than them. I'm going to be able to succeed in a way that they never could. It's the only way. Or just to go, oh, that happened, and then scroll past it and not care. Really, I think the more stoic route of not having this emotionally charged energy of getting revenge and stuff, I think the more stoic route is probably better. Just go, oh, well, I don't care. That's the real power there. That's the real power is just not caring. you know, I saw a quote. I saw a quote. It was something like the real opposite to the real opposite to happiness is not sadness but indifference. It was some kind of edgy bullshit like that, and I thought that was kind of cool because it really is a power. Indifference really is a power when you can sit down. Now, I had this moment today. Someone who I used to care a lot about, who I used to consider one of my best friends, um, I joined this server and I joined the server and then like immediately following me joining in there, they just left. And I was like, well, that's kind of a dick move. Like I didn't do anything to you and yet my existence itself is so absurdly disgusting to you that the act of being in the same room with me, in terms of not even the same room, we're talking about the internet here, the act of being in the same internet space with me is so absolutely disgusting to you that despite the fact I've done nothing to you whatsoever, you can't simply exist in the same place. And I mean, we're part of the same content creation group, we're part of the same collective, and yet we never speak to one another. And I couldn't help but feel just viscerally insulted as a human being when I saw that because, like, how bad do I really have to be, to be someone who deserves that kind of treatment, that just isn't even worthy of being in the same space, let alone speaking to, just in the same space, can't even be in the same server. No, it's insane to me the amount of narcissism you would have to think that way. And, like, I had to take a step back, and I thought, well, if I get offended by this, then obviously I'm just letting them win, which is more of the emotional, ego-driven thought process as to get out of that, thinking through spite and stuff. Like, the other thought that I had was, well, if I let this person's understanding of me, if I let this person's negative and outright factually incorrect assessments of me affect how I feel and who I am, then I'm forever going to be dragged down by that weight. And there's gonna be a lot of dead weight that drags you down if you allow those misunderstandings that you're going to experience with basically everybody to weigh you down. Um, and so I had to sit back and I had to think, is this really worth it? Is it really worth sending this message, getting upset? Is it really worth letting this consume me? Letting this dead weight of this, you know, fairly low IQ individual, bother me that much? And the only way the only way I could deal with it was just by going no. Humans are selfish. Humans are going to do what they believe to be in their best interest for them and themselves only. Any notion of civility, loyalty, any of these things, it doesn't apply. It just doesn't apply. And so, like, when I sat back and I thought about that, and I thought, well, there was a time when I tried to apply these things to the best I possibly could, and I failed at it, and I still try at least to an extent now, if not through sheer apathy. I thought, it doesn't matter. Just don't let it bother you. Because there's going to be a hell of a lot of people who want to misunderstand and judge you on a false premise. And if you let that consume you, then you're just going to be consumed forever. It's like fighting the ocean. The ocean is going to continue flowing. It goes back and forth, slams against one another. The waves, the currents continue going forward, like the force of history. And you can be the current yourself. You can be the person who's going to go with the forces of history and progress forward. Or you can be a straggler. One of these settlers who was on the boat, their boat got crashed by a wave, and now they're simply an element of those waves to the sands of time. They end up drowning in the water, being consumed by it, because they've been constantly trying to fight the ocean. The ocean itself wasn't something they could just embrace. They tried to fight against this force of nature that simply can't be fought. And as a result of that, they end up drowning. And when I thought about that, I couldn't help but feel I would rather, much, much rather, be one with the ocean and follow my own current rather than trying to fight against it and drowning.